Hi, welcome to Give Me the Bible, where God's Word speaks for itself. In continuing our discussion of prayer, in the previous video we talked about the fact that our beliefs affect our prayer life. And really we emphasize the fact that our beliefs affect the kind of questions that we ask to God, but the truth is, our beliefs also affect our reactions to God's answers. And that can negatively affect our prayer life. And so I want to really talk about what it means to pray in faith to God. And let me suggest that it means two things. First of all, it means to pray with confidence and faith in God's ability to grant our prayers. For instance, in Mark chapter 11, we see this emphasized by Jesus to his disciples. They're amazed that Jesus was able to make this fig tree wither just by requesting that it be so. And they're marveling at that. And so Jesus says in Mark 11, verse 22, Jesus answered, saying to them, "Have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says is going to happen, it will be granted to him. Therefore I say to you, all things for which you pray and ask, believe that you have received them, and they will be granted you." Now, Jesus is using some hyperbole here about picking up mountains and casting them into the sea, but he's doing that to make a point. That if we really believe in God and trust in God, we'll believe that all things are possible with God. That there's nothing too big for us to ask God, and that he'll just look at it and say, well, you know, I'm just not powerful enough to grant that prayer. So part of praying in faith is believing and trusting that God has the power to answer our prayers. But the other part of praying in faith is to pray with proper belief or proper faith, because remember, faith in God is always rooted in truth. It's not just some feeling. It's rooted on the truth of God's Word. So if we're going to pray to God, we need to pray to Him according to His Word. So for instance, we couldn't read this passage in Mark 11 and say, oh, well, Jesus is saying no matter what we ask for, God is always going to give it to us. Well, no, that's not true. That may sound like that from what Jesus is saying, but even Jesus later on prayed that he wouldn't have to go to the cross. And so are we saying Jesus just didn't believe hard enough that it was possible for God to take the cross away? Well, no, Jesus really was praying in faith there. But part of Jesus praying in faith in the Garden of Gethsemane when he asked God, for instance, let's just look at it in verse, in the same book, Mark 14, and in verse 36, he was saying, "Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but you will." You see there, Jesus has the faith that all things are possible for God. He doesn't doubt God's power. However, Jesus understands that praying in faith also means praying with the proper belief and the proper understanding of who God is. And part of that for Jesus here is understanding that God may not grant his prayer because it may not be God's will to do that. Okay, look in 1 John chapter 5. 1 John chapter 5, here we have a interesting statement made about our prayers. In John 5, verse 14, this is the confidence, 1 John 5:14, this is the confidence which we have before him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the requests which we have asked from him. Again, we're praying according to his will, and we're recognizing that God may not grant our prayers because he has the right to say no, because he may know things that we don't. He sees the big picture. He sees things we don't. He sees when something may not be good for us, even though we think that it would be good for us. And so many times God is planning something better for us than what we've asked, which is why praying in faith with the proper belief also means that God might make us wait. Right? We might pray for something, but he might take a really, really long time to answer that prayer. And he could be doing that to teach us lessons. He could be doing that because we're just not ready. But praying in faith recognizes that God reserves the right to do that, and it recognizes the right of God to answer our prayers in ways that we may not expect him to. we may look around and think, well, God, you're not answering my prayers, and what's going on here? When in reality, He really is. It's just in a way that we didn't expect. And probably, if my life is any indication of the pattern of God, most of the time God does things in ways I don't expect. It's much better than in what I expected. So we have to pray in faith, meaning that we believe God has all power to answer our prayers, but we also pray in the truth of His Word. I hope that's clear and helpful, and I'll see you next time.